There have been some serious lessons. How are you? You okay?
Yeah, man. Yeah, lessons are interesting, man. It's such a wide scope, you know.
Yeah.
Like you get these small lessons, or you get like these little
Mm.
massive lessons. Some lessons don't change your life very much. Some lessons are
Yes.
groundbreaking and life changing.
Yeah. I often don't even notice when those happen. The little ones. I mean,
Yeah. Little lessons, little lessons are real easy. They start us off real easy when we're youngsters with like, the simple shit, which is like 1 + 1 = 2.
sure.
You learn that lesson. You don't really forget it, like ever,
Or
you
like
know.
you have to keep your feet under you to walk.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. You got it. Orientation, this
Mm-hmm.
way's up, this way's down. Oh, now I have labels for these that I can use in a verbal way to tell
Right.
other people of what I think. Learning
Mm-hmm.
how to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Because you learn how to speak when you're little, but you don't speak very well. And as we get older, we learn how to speak better. Hopefully, we learn how to speak better and better over time.
And those are like taught lessons. Like you probably wouldn't have figured that out. Maybe not nearly as easy.
Yeah, I don't think that I think like if two people like had no verbal or any skills like that were put into an area, like I don't know how you would ever test this, but
Right.
if you
Yeah.
put two people who had no verbal skills together, and then they might be able to to make some things like this, or yeah, who knows, they may make their own words or specific symbols for things eventually, but it would take a while because who knows. But I guess my whole point is that people could the development of speech skills is something that's definitely much easier to learn when it's just handed down. Like your parent,
Easier compared to what?
you're starting with nothing. You're in the woods by yourself. There's no one even to talk to. Why even develop speech?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't.
You would probably like make noises at animals, or make because like there's noises that we make automatically that
Yeah.
have nothing to do with actually communicating anything. Like,
Some good, some bad.
yeah, totally. Like you stub your toe, you're like, ah,
Yeah, yeah.
it hurt. If you had no language skills, you would just make a terrible noise. Or something pops up out of nowhere, and you make like you're like, I'm scared. Oh my gosh. No verbal skills. You'd be like, oh.
Which is actually just the sound of your diaphragm slamming shut.
Totally. So there's some noises that we're definitely making involuntarily. So I mean, past a certain point, though, it's much easier just to have some lessons handed to us versus trying to go through the trouble of building these lessons from scratch, so to speak.
Yeah, that's
You
like the
know?
purpose of society almost is to, well, at least one of them is to deliver these lessons to the youth.
Yeah. So hey, this is what we've discovered so far, so that you know what we haven't discovered so far, so that you guys can go out and discover it for us.
Thanks, we're dead now.
Yeah, totally.
That I feel like I couldn't have been, like, I don't know. Like I feel like I had to go through it. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. That's definitely a totally different kind of lesson.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Like I don't
I've
think mom could have taught
experienced
me
this
that.
What was that?
I don't think mama could have taught me that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
well, it's interesting you say that because she tried really hard. I know that's what I would think. I would laugh too. I mean, no joke at all. But see, this is a weird thing about some lessons, some life lessons, some of these deeper lessons. You actually, they're smaller, almost micro lessons stacked on top of each other over time.
Straw that broke the camel's back kind
Well,
of
I
thing.
mean, and then so basically it's almost like um, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know me as a person, long ago, I remember when there were people trying to hand me lessons, and I was always like, you couldn't tell me nothing. They were like, don't do this, get down from there, stay off of that. I'm like, what do you know? Like, you can't tell me, like, that. It's like, okay, for instance, like, I'm in school, like, people are acting a fool.
Mm-hmm.
I jump on my chair and then step up on my desk, right?
Yeah.
Teacher's like, get off of the I'm like, what? To me, I'm like, well, I'm standing here, my feet are perfectly flat.
Oh,
The
yeah.
desk has 4 feet.
Mm-hmm.
This feels perfectly safe to me. Why? Like, don't tell me to get off this. I'm
Yeah.
fine. I'm fine. I'm not hurting anyone. I'm not hurting myself. Why? You can't tell me. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter what. Oh, you can hurt yourself, but I'm not hurting myself. You know?
Yeah.
So as a youngster, you're like, oh, well, I can defend this logic, so it doesn't matter what logic you bring forth, as long as I can defend my own logic.
Yeah, where the teacher's sitting there like I get that you have stable footing.
Yeah.
But if you crack your head open, I'm going to jail, prison,
Yeah.
something. I'm losing my
Who
job
knows?
at least.
Yeah. So you know, or hey, you know, you could harm yourself permanently through brain damage and/or death,
Oh,
or
yeah.
you know, maybe just hurt your own leg. We're just trying to stop you from hurting yourself right now, you little you little. I want to say something horrible, but I also don't. I want to say something
Well,
like
I think the word you were going to
little
use was
ignorant human,
yes.
because that's what they are.
Yeah.
There's like we think not to get sidetracked too much, but we think as of younger people as being almost like oh well they can't possibly have the same scope of existence as we have as adults. It's like no they just don't have the words or ideals or I'm sorry, they don't
strength
have
of
the
will.
words or ability to describe these feelings in a way that would be like understandable or
Yeah.
exchangeable. But they're still so when you think of your frustration throughout the day, when you think of your happiness and your sadness throughout the day, like a youngster's still having those like very similar like depth of feelings. They're just having them about things that are in their life that matter to them in the same amount that those things that made you feel those ways made you feel. You
Okay,
see?
so that makes
it's
sense.
like, oh, like I go to my job, I have these feelings. Well, like, okay, well, and whereas the youngster's like, oh, I'm going to school, and I have these feelings about it. Their feelings and your feelings, they're not much different, other than the fact that one may be more educated of a feeling, one feeling may be more tangential than the other, one may be more logic based than the other, but none of those things really change the fundamental fact that young humans are still feeling the same amount of feelings that all the rest of the humans are feeling throughout their life. They're still just little humans, and a lot of people mistake that.
If we wanted to represent it in a mathematical term, we could say that like they are feeling these feelings out of a whole of possible feelings.
Yes.
Right? So, and all that whole of possible feelings is not the same as your whole of possible feelings. And I mean WHOLE, not HOLE. And so, but it is 100% to them, and it's 100% to you. So they're, while being
Yes.
not the same 100%,
Correct.
do have a equivalency.
Well, like
sort of.
their personal, absolutely. Which I'm sorry. Which is like, okay, so some of us can experience things that other people haven't experienced or won't experience in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those things and a majority of those things are individual. So like, let's say, not let's say, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
when I was younger, like, we didn't have much money, so the food that we got to eat was very limited.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Okay? So like, when I didn't want to eat something, I didn't get to eat something.
Yeah.
So like what was for lunch was for lunch, and what was for dinner was for dinner. My mother always did her absolute best to keep me fed. And for the most part, I would say I do not remember a point in time when I was a kid in which I went hungry. Okay? So she kept me sustained, but there were points in time in which I decided that I didn't want to eat that for dinner,
Yeah.
and I got nothing for dinner. If I wanted to eat that dinner, it was in the fridge.
Yeah. Go eat
You know
it.
what I mean? Go ahead
It's
and eat
there.
it. It's right there.
Go pick
you
it
know?
up.
And so it was never like that was her way of discipline. That was way of her teaching me that, hey, this is the food that we have.
Yeah.
And if you don't want this food, I can't do much about it. This is the food. This is the food that you have. And that allowed me into, like, as soon as I like got into my teens, I could eat fucking anything. I didn't care. It was more about like sustenance. I was like, sometimes I'd be like,
Yeah,
oh, this
same.
is really yummy. I'd eat it real slow. But most of the time I was like, no, this is food. I eat it. It didn't matter what it tasted like. Yeah, some of this food didn't taste good. Don't care. Eat
Yeah.
food.
Don't
You
get
know,
any food.
and whereas that lesson of like this is what's for lunch means that, like, sure, I had a couple of instances in which my mom needed to be like, no, there is nothing else, and she did that. In which case, I learned that there was no other choice, there was no other opportunity. Whereas like other folks I know personally, you know, like all the kid has to do is yell or scream, and they learn that if they do that long enough, they will get what they want. And achieving that, getting what they want, then teaches them the lesson of, hey, all I got to do is scream and yell, and I
Right.
get what I want. And
Because
that is
the structure of a lesson isn't necessarily like this. There's this truth about the universe that, like, oh, you've finally, congratulations, join the club, you have discovered the truth of the universe. No, I'm sorry, the lesson is really only yours, and you can kind of foster it in other people.
Yeah.
If it's one of those.
Sure. Or and the other thing too is if nobody can, if you are not self-aware enough to confront yourself about these behaviors,
Yeah.
and nobody around you confronts you about these maybe some of these bad behaviors, you know, then they can become ingrained, and we don't understand that what we're doing is hurting or offending or being misinterpreted by other people, or even being correctly interpreted. Because if if you're 15 years old and you're in, and you're in Target, and I want these Legos, and mom's like, no Legos, and all you gotta do is throw a fit, and you'll get some Legos, but you're 15 in Walmart laying on the ground yelling and throwing a tantrum, and nobody says anything or does anything, that's gonna continue.
Yeah.
Nothing's gonna stop that if that person walks out of that store with some Legos in his pocket.
Man.
See? And so this is the problem is when you have human beings who lack the lessons. I don't know. I don't want to be like unnecessarily cruel, but when you have parents who aren't prepared to be parents and don't have the lessons handed down to them, or that they seek these lessons out themselves to become a better parent or to become a good parent before they have children,
Which is like a lot of,
or to become a better parent while they have children, which is very, very hard because children take a ton of time and energy. And of course, you got to like pay for the kids, which means you also have to spend time and energy, I don't know, working and providing.
Yeah.
Which also means you have to like take care of the child, which includes like laundry and doing dishes and preparing meals.
Oh yeah.
And like that's only and God forbid you have to do that as a single parent.
And if you're
not
poor,
even including two parents.
If you're
poor,
and
if you're poor, that's even a further.
Your diet isn't as good as it can be. Your exercise
time,
isn't as good.
So how much time do these people really have to become better parents if they themselves came from an orientation that did not have a solid parental lesson to be learned? Like if a person is in a situation where they grow up with parents of whatever that looks like, a couple of people who are adults, meaning two people who are adults,
yeah,
or more people who are adults in the area that you can go to that are your parents, that are your main caregivers, and those humans, through their co-opting, help to raise a person who understands what lessons are and how to hand them down, and which lessons are learnable and which lessons have to be experienced, and blah blah blah. Without that knowledge, with that knowledge, then they come and they have these children and they're well prepared, which means that they then get to hand this wonderful set of lessons that they have conscripted through countless generations of good parenting. You end up with these people who are highly successful because they have generational wealth, because they're highly successful people who are breeding and creating highly successful people. And when I say breeding, I don't mean physically or literally. I mean like two people come together and there is a human that is added to that is a youngster, and then they start then helping to create a lessonscape for that human. So
you don't mean the biological process of breeding.
Correct.
You mean the
almost like you breed a good atmosphere. It's not two atmospheres humping making a better atmosphere. To breed a better atmosphere, people work together to create together a thing.
Yeah, to manifest.
Yeah, that's more like it.
Mostly in life. I would assume that would be what it means.
Yeah, versus like the direct biological and or scientific meaning of the word breeding. I was using it in a more colloquial term. But and maybe that's good, maybe it's bad. I don't really know. But so we have these like these interesting things because there's like some lessons that like I said before, they're easily attainable, and then there's other lessons that are harder to attain. Like for instance. My significant other and I I have been experiencing this with that person, and it's very interesting because I have this very interesting lesson that I want to impart to her.
Is it like, because like today I got really pissed off and I said some things that I really shouldn't have said.
Okay.
Because I felt like it was okay because I was angry. But I'm feeling like maybe that wasn't the case.
Yeah, actually, very, very similar as a matter of fact, and we can work with that as well.
That's okay.
Versus me putting it on myself and my onus, we can put it on you and yours. It's much easier to address what's outside of ourselves often than it is to address what's inside of us, and sometimes we can be more observant of others. You know.
Yeah.
We can see, and at least with that presented data, I can work with that. So like that's like, oftentimes when we feel like our personal feelings are validated or like justified, and we'll be like, oh well, you know, like, well I came like okay, so like last night you said that you were going to do the dishes.
Yeah.
And I came home today and the dishes are not done.
Right. So
like at that point in time, you're like, okay, so you know, I feel justified in feeling frustrated.
Mm-hmm. And maybe even assume malice in the other person.
Sure, like how dare they not do the dishes when they said they would, or like, oh man, did they just like forget the dishes again?
Like they just like looked at the dishes and they were like, fuck Barrett, and they just kick it. Just like walk away.
Yeah. Hey, I know I said I was gonna do these dishes, but actually, fuck that motherfucker. And fuck his dishes, dog. Yeah, right? So then you're like, oh yeah, you know, like, instead of like, there's a really great colloquialism, I'm going to slide it in here, which is like, never assume malice when ignorance will do.
Oh,
so it's much easier
and
I know for a lot of us, it's very easy to be like, oh, you know, like, oh, that guy who cut me off in traffic, surely he knew he cut me off in traffic.
Right.
What a dick.
He looked at me,
when
he
in
said,
reality,
fuck that guy.
he may have been cruising up, and you may have been in his blind spot in his vehicle, and he may not even have seen you there, and cruised over in front of you, and then he's in his car like, oh my gosh, I'm such a dick, I didn't even mean to cut that guy off, that was a total accident. My bad. And how you know, like,
I usually go, haha, oh, whoops, and then like raise my hand.
Yeah, totally. But you know, and it's really hard to like you know, in the moment to assume, oh man, maybe this guy just didn't see me,
right?
And then just instantly forgive him. And hey, you know what? Now you're just a whole bunch less frustrated every day if you just assume that instead of someone has done this to me, think, oh, maybe this person just doesn't know what they did.
Yeah.
Because it's much easier to think of all the times that you yourself has messed up on accident and been like, oh, I didn't even mean that to come out like that. I didn't even mean that to be like that.
Yeah.
But this person interpreted it like this whole way that now they're super mad at me. You know? So oftentimes it's easier, or oftentimes it's better to assume ignorance instead of malice.
Awesome.
So you know, like you roll in and you see like, oh, you know, dishes, whatever, they're left undone, even though this so and so has said they were going to do the dishes, and you're like, oh man, the dishes aren't done. So you know, at this point in time, you have one of two choices. Your choice A is to assume malice. You're like, oh man, you know what a jerk, didn't do the dishes like they said they do, and then you just justify that, hey man, they said they do the dishes and the dishes aren't done.
Yeah.
So now you're going to use that as a justification to then have the feeling where you then graduate from I'm feeling frustrated that the dishes aren't done, to then that graduates to now I'm angry that the dishes aren't done.
Yeah.
Right? So then you have the connection between, because anger is a secondary emotion, you know?
Right.
So you don't just go from nothing, from going from normal feeling to being angry. There's always a connector feeling between the two. There's always
So
a
it's like,
primary feeling.
Like a trigger. It's like a trigger.
That's definitely one word. Yes. That oftentimes we can say, hey, there's I have a feeling when someone says a word, and that word will trigger this feeling for me. So you tell other, so for you in reality land where people live and where that term originated was actually to say, hey, for you personally, this is for you to identify your triggers so you can cope with other people's using of this triggering language. It's not to tell other people, hey, this triggers me, I'm upset now. That's not what it's for.
Yeah, that's like the
taken
modern...
completely out of context.
Well, it's a new definition, I suppose.
Well, I mean, I hear you, but it's I hear that. I would disagree. I would say that is a robbery. I would say some people who were ignorant walked over and took a word that they did not understand completely, and then started just using that word for a new definition of a word that's almost the same as the word that they're using it for. So I disagree. I say that word is stolen and then appropriated. Boom. Anyways, what was I saying before I so rudely interrupted myself with a tangent?
It's quite the claim you've made there.
Yeah, I hope you like that one. Get roasted.
Yeah, you're talking about. You were talking about how like you get frustrated at the dishes, and then now you've justified it to anger.
Yeah. So then you have the justification where you're like, where you justify a feeling. You're like, okay, well, actually, I feel like I have the right to feel frustrated, or to feel frustrated. Yes. I feel like I have the right to feel frustrated about the dishes not being done because they said they would do it and they did not. And so now that graduates into anger, and you're like, okay, so now I feel, because of the justification to frustration, now I'm angry.
Justification to frustration.
Right? So then you're like, I'm angry, And so like ultimately now comes another choice. The choice is either to justify an action based upon your feelings, which are, by the way, now we are two feelings deep. So now you've had a feeling based upon a feeling. So now you get to establish whether or not that the justification of your feelings warrants an action, which means now you're going to take an internal dialogue, an internal feeling, an internal reaction.
Which there usually is a physical reaction. You're like...
Sometimes no, that's not necessarily. That's a case by case basis.
Oh, okay.
And a person by person basis.
I guess in my case, yes. I usually maybe like something frustrates me, and I'll like put my hand on my head, or like clench my fists, or like be like,
Yeah, for some people there I'm sure are physical manifestations of a frustration or an anger for sure.
Yeah.
But when we come to terms with our internal workings, we can have more respect for them, and then it's a lot less about action leading, or thought and or feeling leading directly to action. Whereas like what you just did was justify, hey, when I feel angry, it makes me do grr. And I would actually disagree. I would say that the way that you've learned to put I'm frustrated out into the universe.
Yeah.
The internal feeling of I'm frustrated or I'm angry for you've learned to put that out of yourself by going grr.
I go grr, and then I look at you. I'm like grr, and you're like,
now I'm angry at you. Yeah,
or like grr, and you see do you see and I'm like, are you also frustrated at this thing?
Sure.
And then if they're also like grr,
then... communication. Yeah. Like, this is how I communicate that I'm angry or frustrated. Whereas like, once we get practiced with anything, we get better at it, and it becomes ingrained in our world. We've already talked about this. The second part, that's the secondary, or that's the primary part that we know is that, and then we come to the secondary part, which is that we learn our lessons, and then through these lessons we learn we can use those through repetition and through practicing what we've learned with these lessons. See, and then we can practice improving the things, and or not, or we simply learn how to almost be more of an internal micromanagement process to where there are no real, until you've been practicing that, you're reinstituting, you're realigning your actions, and you're realigning your internal monologue, your internal feelings with how you generate that out into the world, how you manifest that, right? So you have a justified feeling that you've justified internally, right? And then now you have to decide, okay, so does this justified internal feeling,
Am I actually thinking about this?
Now can I justify an action upon this? See?
Yeah, am I making these calculations in the moment, or is this like a pre-decided thing?
Sometimes you can in the moment. If you can be there in the moment and you can be that centered in the moment, there are moments in which I do have these internal dialogues with myself in the moment while they're happening. There are other times where I'm after the fact, and I look back and I'm like, wait a minute, how could I handle this differently? This didn't end very well. It ended in a way that I'm not happy with. It ended unhealthily, and so I want to go ahead and sit down by myself with myself and think, hey, so if this is a situation that ended badly, what point in time do I think it ended badly? And try and do it without your feelings being really intertwined with it. Because this is a logical process. This is a logical process, and logic and feelings don't mix very well. They can mix in certain increments to a certain amount. However, oftentimes, once you've had some logic, then you have some feelings. Or once you have some feelings, then you have some logic. Or that's generally they don't really mix too much. They may mix in the area in which one transfers into the other. So right now what we're talking about is what we're doing is being logical about feelings, which is why it's difficult to interpret. So I can appreciate that you want clarification.
Yeah, that makes sense. Though I see at least the legs in your argument.
Let's continue moving through this topic. So we have the justified feeling, then we have the point where we're like, okay, so now we have can we justify an action? So we walk up, we see the dishes aren't done, we're frustrated, we're like, yeah, but internally we're like, yeah, but they said they'd do the dishes today and the dishes aren't done. So now you've just justified the fact that you're frustrated to yourself, and now you've graduated to being kind of angry about this. So now in the moment you have a choice. Either you're going to continue that angriness and allow that angriness to then fuel your next action without any further logical deduction, or you're going to recognize, hey, I'm angry right now, and when I'm angry, I personally am now going to attempt to be logical about this. And then I'm going to think, wait a minute. In a logical progression, I say, can I assume ignorance instead of malice? Which then makes you think, okay, well, maybe they forgot. Or maybe, hey, maybe they're not home from work yet. Or maybe there was some kind of a thing. You know what? Instead of being angry right now, I think I might just like ask them. I might text them. I might walk into the next room if they're in the area. I can be like, hey, and now that I'm not angry because I'm thinking logically, it allows me to back away from that angriness or that frustratedness, because now you're dealing with something logic and feelings don't mix very well. So the more logical you can move in that moment, the less angry or frustrated you become. See?
So, like, let's say I'm in that situation. I come home, I see the dishes aren't done. I ask somebody else to do. I'll even just say, like, I asked somebody to do something, and then they didn't do it. Like, and it's, like, past its due time. I'm kind of a person who, like, works on that kind of schedule.
You're saying because you personally value diligence, and the keeping of your word, that when other people don't do those things, you're like, hey, because I hold this standard to myself, it's kind of extra annoying because you hold yourself to such rigid standards that when others do not, you see that as almost a character flaw.
Yeah, and I don't even really hold it against
You
them.
probably don't even register that. Really.
Yeah.
And so you've probably never. I don't know if you've ever even thought about it in that context.
No. But once you said it, I was like, yeah.
Because a matter of fact.
But really, what I would do is just do the dishes. If I like notice,
me too.
I would just do them. Yeah. I'd be like, okay, specifically because it's a thing that needed to be done and isn't done yet, and I delegated it, but then that delegation was actually, so it's actually on me. If I want to find some sort of blame in the situation, which I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah. I mean, but blame is definitely not a necessary part.
But I could take it all the way back to myself and say, hey, I should have just done the thing instead of asking them to do the thing.
That's a very good point. Is like you could also roll up, and one of the logical steps past that point to move yourself away from being frustrated or angry or whatever kind of feeling you're having in that moment that you'd rather not be having, and you look at that situation, you're like, hey, check it out though, like, if I'm willing to spend this much time and energy being upset and or angry, maybe I should just get it done myself, because if it's really bothering me to the point where I'm frustrated or angry, then maybe I should just be taking care of this myself. And then you could even take that a step further, and you could solve that permanently by being like, hey man, I see that you don't like doing dishes, and you know what I mean. Like this is if this is the case, like it's the third or fourth time that you've said you're going to do the dishes, and you haven't done them, and I do them. How about this? How about I do all the dishes from now on? Yeah. But you take out all the trash and clean the cat box. Because I notice that you don't mind cleaning the cat box, and I see you occasionally taking out the trash. So if you would rather do those two things, I'll take care of all the dishes.
If it were me, actually, that person probably has some phobia regarding water, food, dishes thing, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the thing is like,
like
sometimes if we don't mind doing something and we want to see that thing done, sometimes the best way to get that thing done is to do it ourselves, but make it advantageous that we do it by ourselves by using that as some kind of a trading currency, because that's what we are as humans. Our time is important. Our time is worth money. Our time and energy, and what we spend our time and energy doing and feeling are what, in the end, our life totals will be. If we spend time justifying anger and justifying frustration, and letting that justified anger or frustration lead into what we see, I mean, we allow those feelings that we have justified previously to then justify actions outside of ourselves, where we then are acting out our anger or acting out our frustration, and in which those times, all the time that we've spent thinking upset, all the time we've been upset, all the time that we're now spending angry, all of that time is now at the end of your life going to be, hours, days, months, years spent angry. When instead you could just be moving in a way where you're like, instead of being angry about this, I'm going to try and figure out how to move about this in a way where I feel less anger about the way that things are, where I feel less frustration, where I feel less whatever.
Or if that's the way that you want to live,
in the work. That's what all I'm trying to say. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm also saying seeing as that is true, if you're a person who wants to have those hours as being angry or sad or whatever, then you can go after that. But at least you can say, I chose this.
Yeah, see, and that's the thing too. I'm not trying to fault anybody who lives in a space like that, because I know there are people who live in spaces that I would rather not live in. Yeah. Well, this is an easy one. For me at least, a professional athlete, man. Anybody who seriously competes in sports, like those guys do stuff that I could never personally justify.
The williest of willpowers.
Oh my, yes, so much drive, so much will, so much, okay, so just think about the time spent from sore aches and muscles, the time spent just working muscles to the point of weakness, working out, getting up early,
scary feeling,
staying up late, you're working physically, you're always sweating, the hard work and pain that comes with all that hard work. And I bet you if you ask them, they'd say, hey, well, look, this is the thing. The trade-off for doing this is that when you win, or when you work your way up, or when you can see the advantages coming with this hard work, that's where the stuff feels extra good. That's where, when those workouts get done and you do, you're like, oh hey, I ran I ran my quarter mile X amount faster than I did 2 weeks ago after this rigorous training I've been doing. They'd say, well, that's the counter to the bad feeling of, for what I would consider what feels bad about working out. Whereas they were like, oh, this is the, even though this part is hard, this part is good.
It's scary.
So it's about, like, so these humans, they've realigned the way that their brains function in a way that they no longer view the pain of working out as hurty pain. They view the pain of working out as, this is advantageous growth. And that change in mindset for them allows them to go farther than I personally feel like I could go in that arena. However, there are different ways in which I'm like, I will go into the emotional depths of my soul. I will go look into the darkest corner and stare that dead in the eye, unflinching and unblinking, because I've done so much work in my past. I've done so much work with other people in their past. So like, and I've been through so much personally that those treks, for me, they're very, very simple and very easy. They don't hurt very much anymore. Where other people are like, oh man, if I was to tread back into my most horrible memories, and I'm like, I can hang out right there. I can talk about it. I can talk in that space and talk honestly and truthfully and candidly in that space, quite simply and easily, because I've been doing it for so long, because I've spent so much time in that place where other people would deem incredibly scary and would never in a million years dive down that hole into that into cave divers for some people, like you dive into a cave.
Not for me.
Yeah. There are some people who are like, never in a million years, but they're like, oh, this is where it's at. So, and this is the thing, it's different strokes for different folks. Different humans express themselves differently, and through that differentiation, we find ourselves in individual places where we can talk from a place where other people would have a hard time speaking from. See? And for me, I feel like I've been through so many fucked up, emotionally fraught, back and forth altercations in my life that I can defuse almost any. It's very, very difficult to knock me off center as far as like the emotional stuff goes. And I feel like part of learning how to find yourself more grounded and more centered in a moment by moment, day by day, week by week, year by year fashion is to practice having conscious thought as well as feeling consciously. Meaning that, like, while you're feeling, you're being conscious that you're feeling. Because a lot of us, what will happen, I know I did this a lot before I learned these lessons. A lot of this had to do with a fear paradigm. There was a lot of stuff that I was very afraid of when I was younger, and as soon as I started confronting these fears head on, the more I realized that these fears, I could interact with them and thus rid them from my life. I could find an area where I knew that I was afraid of and explore that area, and then I started to learn that it was more like, oh, I feared what I didn't know. And then once I realized that I was just fearing the unknown, it started being like, oh, I need to seek out knowledge. I need to seek out these areas that I'm afraid of. I need to seek out these problematic things, these things that make me afraid.
You fear the unknown. Know it, I guess.
Yeah, confront it. And so I'm like, okay, so then I'm looking for ignorance. I'm looking for my own ignorance. And that's what started me on the internal journey of, hey, where do these things come from? What's going on around me? Like, how can I better myself from understanding these things? And how can I take these things and help my friends and my loved ones also express themselves and learn how to like communicate and exist in an emotional way without being slave to one's emotions, or without speaking emotionally, where you can speak from an emotional space without being overtaken by your emotions. And a lot of people, like, once they start speaking about an emotional topic, once they start coming close to an emotion, it's almost like, I hate to use the term, but it's almost like, no, okay, so I won't. It's almost like a gravitational pull, right?
Okay.
So it's like, because they feel like they might be feeling a feeling, they almost start to feel more of that feeling, which makes them get closer to feeling more of those feelings. It's almost like this cycle where the feeling builds more feeling until that feeling then generates itself into a secondary or third feeling. You know, like I would say like a third feeling would be, say, because we were already on this earlier, would be like, oh, you walk up and you're frustrated. That's a first feeling. And then frustrated graduates to anger, and then anger graduates to rage.
Okay, that's one
See?
train. There's
That's
another
one 3-point where you would have to go through. You can't just go from frustrated to irate. You know what I'm saying? There's actually almost tiers to our feelings, like almost like you almost have to roll through one feeling completely before you hit the next feeling, and you have that feeling that then so we almost, if we're not careful, what can happen is our feelings, once we start justifying our feelings through our own feelings, so it's like, oh, I feel like this, so now I'm going to justify.
Unconsciously.
Of course, unconsciously. At first, unconsciously.
Yeah.
Later, upon realizing this, one can come upon.
There's totally conscious justifications. Things like, let's say, like I feel interested, and then I feel enamored, or even
Interested, or then interested then spawns curiosity.
right, exactly.
That then spawns exploration.
Or even adoration, which then becomes
I guess exploration
infatuation.
really isn't feeling.
Huh?
I guess, but it doesn't matter. What?
Adoration, and then infatuation.
Sure, you're talking more like on a love scale. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And a lot of that has conscious justifications, going from I'm interested, and then, wow, they're my type, so I justify being a little more curious about who they are,
Yes.
what they are,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, this idea actually is not just like limited to one's like direct feelings. It does apply directly, as we said earlier, but I mean, this is something that can be moved out once this tool is understood. It's kind of a meta tool. It can be moved. It can be used for behavior modification of oneself. It can be used as basically a. You can start to develop almost a indirect relationship between your actions and your feelings, because for some of us what happens is we have a feeling and then we act, and there is no line like for instance, for some of us, including me in my youth, if you were to walk up to me and you were to yell in my face, I would immediately punch you.
Well,
This would be the chain of events. It would be as quick and as simple as that. I wouldn't be thinking, hey, what is this guy thinking? Or maybe he's upset with me. It's my feeling my reaction would be this. I'm standing here minding my own business. And this nobody who I don't know comes up out of nowhere and just invades my space and starts screaming at me? I'm gonna fix this mistake right now. And then I teach him a lesson. That's my internal dialogue. See?
Yeah.
And that's just because there's no like. So I'm not trying to say, hey, every single time.
And that was the lesson
I've
you
ever
learned.
Thought about anything, I always take a minute to think. No, what I'm saying is this is a skill that's developed slowly, piece by piece, over a long period of time.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
And nowadays, like, I can feel the emotions turning. So I'll be driving in my car, and then, like, someone will drive up on me, tailgate, jump around me, get in front of me, and I'm all like, oh no. Because I already know, internally, this is a trigger for me.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And I think to myself, this motherfucker slows down,
Yeah.
and my eye'll twitch a little bit, and then if they do that,
Yeah.
I'll be like, this and then I'll be like,
doesn't
nope,
make sense to me.
slow, no, you're not gonna do this again. Just let him go. Just slow down. Just slow down. Let him win. Let him win. It doesn't matter. He's not more of a man for having punked you in his car. You are no less a man for having get punked by this guy in his car.
There's also an important thing I wanted to point out. You went, that guy, if he slows down, then I'm going to get mad.
Yeah.
And like, you're like, I know that he's going to slow down, because I know this guy, because I've seen these behaviors, and they all happen in this order. Or like, somebody who behaves in that one way behaves in this other way. And it doesn't make sense to me. If, like, you understand them, you're like, that, oh my god, if that tiger freaking bites that gazelle, oh my god. And then the tiger bites the gazelle, and you're like, gee, I fucking knew it. How dare that tiger be a tiger?
Yeah. Well, see, and that actually is a perfect segue, because, like, not everyone is like that, you know? Like, and that actually leads us directly back to the beginning, but also, not only does that tie together, it leads to a very fantastic additional point, which is that just because we've recognized a pattern present in others doesn't necessarily mean that that pattern will always play out the same. Number one, first and foremost, is people will surprise you if you give them a chance. But if you do not give people a chance, people will never have a chance to surprise you, and thus you will always be simply confirming your own bias. You'll always be confirming your own bias based upon the fact that you never gave them a chance, because you've already dubbed that this guy's going to cut me off.
Yeah.
And so because of that, when he speeds up to pass me, I'm gonna speed up.
Yeah.
And stop him from passing me.
Because I know.
Because I know what this guy's gonna do.
Yeah.
And so in which case you can actually, unfortunately, like, cut off your nose to spite your face because you think you know.
Yeah.
But this is where we have to realize that just because it has been true in the past doesn't mean it will always be true. And again, just because any one of these pieces can be changed.
There are things we can't assume, like if the car going fast behind you, you can say, hey, that guy must want to go fast. And so, like, if you want to be, I don't know, helpful, you could get out of his way.
Yeah.
You know? Or their way.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Is like, I don't even mind if people go fast. If they want to risk a ticket to go over the speed limit, then that's on them and that's in their world.
It's
For
also
me
not on me
though,
to stop them.
I am a firm believer and an absolute lover of cruise control. Because I roll in, I see a sign, it says X amount of miles an hour, and I'm like, I go to X amount an hour, and I hit that button and click, and I'm just cruising, and it's lovely, and I never speed. I never get into altercations, and I never get tickets, because it's just like...
You never think about how fast you're going, or if you're going too slow. Yeah.
All I gotta do is make sure that the people in front of me are not slowing down. And to act accordingly, and to change into my lanes. And I mean, that doesn't mean that I get to, like, drive less, like, alert.
Ooh.
I'm a very alert person. I'm a very defensive driver because I drove motorcycles for years. And because of that, it made me very, very aware of what other human beings do on the road and how much they really don't pay attention. And because of that, now I'm an ultra-safe car driver. Again, one of those lessons that it's difficult to translate unless you've done both. And then it's easily translated, you know?
Just like that saying, everybody should be wait staff.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I
And
like
I mean,
that.
I hear that, but also, like,
Not everybody should be wait staff.
well...
Some people will be really bad at it.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You know, but I mean, we always have to give people and opportunities the chance to prove us wrong. You know? And that's the thing. Is even though we can gird our loins and we can protect ourselves during those times, we still have to trust. We still have to trust people, you know? Like, just because we ourselves have had, say, our trust broken by people, it doesn't mean that all people are not trustworthy. That still means that you have to guard yourself and trust people in a way that they and you have to trust people according to what they present as their own trustability. You know, you walk up to someone and you can, you know, and you've been interacting with them for a while. You know, you can hand them a small piece of trust.
Yeah,
you know,
you make a judgment.
A piece of trust that isn't ultimately going to hurt you too badly. Because because at this point it's a gamble. And never gamble that which you cannot afford to lose. In which case, with your trust, if it's been hurt, you're going to walk up and you want to gamble a little bit of trust on someone, try and make a new friend. You can extend that trust. And if they violate that trust, then you just simply don't put any more trust there. It's very simple. See? And if they're like, oh, if they come back later and like, hey, look, you know, I really didn't, and they give you a good fucking sob story, you know, give people the chance to prove you wrong. Go ahead and offer them another piece of inconsequential trust.
Unless they robbed me, then I don't give them another trust.
Obviously there are lines, you know.
That's just my line.
If someone hits you, physically, like assaults you, that you should probably not hang out with that person anymore, even after they've gotten treatment for hitting people. Mainly because of the fact that this needs to be this needs to be a forever lesson that this person learns.
Yeah.
So you don't, you know, like there are obviously going to be exceptions to every rule, because there are exceptions to every rule.
Just like you were saying, you want to take every person individually.
Correct.
Give them their
individual. But once some levels of trust are crossed, then you can trust other people
that they
to not hit you. But that one person, in that instance, they've now lost the ability to be anywhere near enough to you to hit you. In my opinion, that's the way that should be done. That person can still be friends and interact with other people. I'm not saying this person should be exercised or whatever, but from your life they should. That way they learn, hey, if I hit people, there's no more of these people will leave. Instead, if you hang out with a person who hits you and they hit you again, that's twice that they've hit you, and that's even more of a reason why you should probably not be hanging out with people who hit people. Is because if people hit people, they're probably going to hit you, and if people hit you before, they're probably going to hit you again.
Which is not like if they like bat you on the shoulder or like.
No, I'm talking assault.
Like
I'm mostly like nodding at more difficult things like spousal abuse, or like the thing that like macho dudes just dismiss, like bar house brawls, or like, oh, we just got drunk and had us a little fist fight, it's not that big of a deal, we're still friends. It's like, nah, man, like, we can't be friends after you physically assaulted me regardless of our inebriation levels, because you've shown me that you'll hit people, which means that I don't really want you around my kids or my girlfriend or my friends or my family, because now you're just gonna, like, I don't know if maybe I'll make you angry and you're gonna mash out my kid, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that you won't, because you've already tried to mash me out. So what makes me think you wouldn't mash my friends and family? Which means, like, I can still know you, but we're never gonna be close enough to give you the opportunity to hit me again. However, if we're hanging out and I'm like, hey, dude, like, I'm thinking about, like, going and picking up this thing. There's only one left of it, bro. Like, I really, really want it. and then you go out and you buy that thing, and then I go and as I'm going into the store, you're walking out with a big smile on your face, like, ah. I'm like, oh, you son of a bitch, that's fucked up, you know? And then you don't tell that person a secret for a while, but if later on they come back on down the line and they're like, hey man, like, back in the day, I was a dick, man, and I just wanted to let you know that my bad, and I'm sorry, and I've really been doing some work to change. You know what I mean? Like, hey, that's cool, whatever. And you hang out with them for a minute, and you're like, and you know, you can offer them another carrot. Like, hey, man, you know, like, and you know, maybe not the same thing. You're like, oh, you know, like, leave them in, you know, like, leave your phone unlocked and leave it on the counter, and walk away so that they, so that you can, so not so that you know, you just do something so that you're not too worried about what the trust being is. You give them another chance, because if it is true that they did improve themselves, that they are a better person, then they'll probably be an even better friend to you because of the fact that they respect the fact that you're willing to give them a second chance, which then means they're probably going to be a better person to have in your life. You know what I'm saying? Because they're going to be also like there to help you grow, because you're being there willing to help them grow, which means that that's going to be a much better friend in the long run. You know, so you can't just cut people off if they ever make a mistake. Like, that's nonsensical. But there's also a point in which a mistake is so grandiose, it is so permanent, it is so gnarly that one must simply sever ties with that person, and that person goes one way and you go another. You know? Mm-hmm. But this is the interesting thing. This all comes back to itself, which is that like, there are oftentimes lessons that we can't know until we know the previous lessons. So like, if I tried to describe what I see as the simple statement of justified feelings do not justify action, and I want to try and hand that to, say...
So, ethical statements like these
Yes.
have deep meanings. One of the meanings is immediately, like, understood from reading it. Like,
yeah.
Justified feelings do not justify actions. And that makes sense. But, like, topically. But then there's the meaning of it that's...
more obscure, more hidden?
derived from deep analysis, yeah.
Sure.
So what is your analysis?
Okay. Well, I mean, the analysis is that just because we personally can justify some feelings is because, like, we feel like we've been wronged, or we feel like we're upset, or we feel like we are offended. It doesn't necessarily justify moving that internal dialogue outward to where, like, okay, now that I'm having these feelings, I'm now gonna, like, do something about it. Like, oh, I feel offended, so now I'm going to, like, act out, or I feel hurt, so now I'm going to, like, withdraw. Like, because these internal feelings, not all feelings are, whether they're justified or not justified. And people are like, well, not justified feeling, what do you mean by that? Well, that's simple. A non-justified feeling is one of those bizarro world feelings that we all have from time to time. That's like where you're like doing something, and then like you almost get like this voice or this feeling or this drive that's like, oh, we'll do this funny, you know, like I don't even know how to say it in a way that's not super fucked up. So I guess I'll just say it in a super fucked up way.
Okay.
Just because it's because if you use a really extreme topic or really extreme example, it's sometimes very easy to get. So
yeah.
Like, you know, sometimes when you're driving along like a really steep road, like on a mountain pass, and you look over and you're like, oh man, you know what'd be funny is if I just drove off this thing. Mm-hmm. And of course you're not actually thinking, hey, I'm gonna drive off this thing, or you're thinking, but like, there's a feeling that you get that's like, yeah, but like, what if I did? You know what I'm saying? And nobody ever, like, I mean, you know, so my whole point is, even though it's a very extreme thing, and I never ever condone suicide, that's a temporary, it's a permanent fix to a temporary problem.
411
I would never ever condone suicide in any way. This is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that sometimes we get these just like temporary, nonsensical feelings that are just neurons firing off in our brain at random. And it is scientifically proven, you can look it up, But sometimes that neuron firing is a feeling that then happens, and that feeling is then interpreted by your brain as best as it can as a logical and or a feeling. And those things is like, so when we have one of those, that's an unjustified feeling.
Yeah.
You know, that's a thing that just happens, and you're just like, you know, and you just like have a thought about it, and you're like, ah.
And then I have a dream where I actually do drive off the thing, and then...
Yeah, oh yeah, we're not even going to dreams. So it's like, you know, like, you're like, but I don't know, man. Like, I don't want to swing too much on too many nuts. But there's this guy, and his name is Christopher Titus, and he does a really great bit. And Titus's really great bit to everybody has like an internal asshole, like a person inside of them who is just like, who is their internal asshole, and that person inside of them is almost like a voice that says dickish things sometimes. So like, you're hanging out and you're doing a thing and you make a mistake, and you're like, the thing that you think to yourself is, you fucking dick, why do you do that? That's not you saying it. I mean, it is you saying it to you, but to a certain extent, that's just a reaction. That's a feeling that you're having, that you're putting words to, which is like, and so like, when we have negative self-talk like that, a lot of times it's like a feeling that then inside of us, because inside of us, actions, our thoughts and feelings can be very, very quick, and happen in a way that is not conscious. So you're like, oh, you dropped the pan. You're like, oh, you fucking dick. Oh, you son of a bitch. Whatever it is that you say to you.
I'm like, I like throw my hands up and like, I'm like, ah!
Oh, okay. You do that then.
Because I'm like afraid it's gonna drop them onto my toe. Because I'm never in the kitchen with shoes on.
Oh, you're thinking hot pan. I mean, that's fair. That's a fair. I did not dictate the status of the pan. I was thinking more about just like, because sometimes when I reach for stuff, I just drop it.
Oh. Ouch.
So like, sometimes I'll like grab a pan and I'll go to pull the pan out, and the pan will hit the edge, and I wasn't grabbing the pan very tight, so like the pan like bounces around in the pan thing and sounds like, you know, like I'm Quasimodo ringing the bells in Notre Dame at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
And I'm like, inside, I'm like, you son of a bitch, quiet down.
Which is funny.
That was the internal dialogue that I ran. So it's very interesting that your internal dialogue was, oh my God, this pan is hot. You know, a runaway screaming is to avoid burning self. Excellent.
Or crushing toes.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I tirade. I don't even know what the fuck we were talking about.